Crazy stupid podcast.
This fucking family.
What happened? Just tell me what happened.
This fucking family. Spoilers alert for anyone who has not seen the Succession series finale, season 4, episode 10. Do not watch this if you have not watched this episode, because there are major spoilers that we're going to talk about throughout the next 5 to 10 minutes. Just to give you a bit of a backstory, you probably have caught some of it. So the plan was Shiv has that deal with Lucas behind the scenes, and in yesterday's episode, he tells her over the phone, yeah, basically the DOJ and the president, they're not going to step in. Menken's not going to step in, the fascist one. If we have an American CEO. Basically, he sort of implied that he would choose her, and everyone sort of assumed that he would pick her because they'd been working together behind the scenes. That is not what he wanted to do at all. I think he was a little annoyed at the way the media portrayed the two of them together. Like, you know how sometimes the New York Times or Rolling Stones or, they'll have a picture that's sort of done almost like caricatures of the people who they're talking about. And so they had this picture of Lucas, and he was like a puppet, and Shiv was pulling the strings. So he kept looking at it. I know he was trying to say it didn't bother him. I don't know. I think it kind of did. Because then he brought up some other examples of she was a little bossy, particularly with his fake numbers. The numbers for his followers were not real. So Greg, he's always kind of been Team Kendall, kind of, sort of, right? And
Kendall's the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
The drug guy.
He has had some substance abuse
Sorry.
issues, yes. So long story short, he finds out that they're not going to choose Shiv, and they're actually going to choose her husband, Tom.
That's going to make everything
So Greg tells Kendall, and in the midst of all of their turmoil, Kendall's like, okay, no, we need to rally together because we need to keep the business in the family. They needed a vote, 7-6 majority from the board to kill the deal, because he was going to buy their company for an absurd amount of money, basically. And it was to the point where the board was like, we can't say no to this, essentially. But then when they find out that he's essentially about to backstab Shiv, the three of them work together to try to make sure that they get 7. Because without Shiv and Roman, you wouldn't get 7. And Kendall wants to be the one to be in charge of the company. And at first, all three of them were going to be in agreement with it. For the first half of that episode, it felt like they were finally together. All right, we're going to back Kendall, and he will be the one to get the company. They're doing the vote. Everyone, it's yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And it is 6-5. We get to Roman, and he hesitates, but then he says no, he doesn't want the deal. Which is what they want. So now it's 6-6. We get to Shiv, and she says, I'm sorry, I need a minute. She gets up and goes to some other meeting room across the hall, and then Kendall, obviously, and Roman follow her in there, and they just start arguing. She doesn't want it to be him. Neither of them, Roman and Shiv, did not want it to be Kendall, because they love each other, but they hate each other. It's a weird dynamic that they have. It all falls apart. They start hurling pretty hurtful things to each other, and Tom ends up getting the entire company, and they are all out. But it's implied that Shiv and Tom are actually going to stay together.
Oh, so she will still have access.
So she's at least got one hand on the steering wheel, and she found a way to get her brothers out. No, but you could tell their relationship was messy, but there was something real there between her and Tom. And they did a very fascinating job of exploring that throughout the series. And I think this season really showed, okay, they actually do really care about each other. And in their own, rich, white, elitist, toxic way, it landed as though they were going to make it work. So,
Well, they have to.
well, they don't have to.
I mean, Shiv kind of does.
It is in her interest
Yeah.
to stay married to Tom. And the relationship between Shiv and Tom has always been fascinating throughout the entire show because there's been a clear power dynamic where
Yeah.
Tom has been underneath her.
I remember that from what I would see of the show.
Right, because even Logan said it in a very mean way where he was like, you're scared of being betrayed and so you're marrying a man that's fathoms beneath you. And then he ends up literally calling Shiv a coward, right? And it hurts her feelings, but there is some slight truth to it. Shiv did marry someone that at least was not in her class, was not in her tier, because in her mind, this was someone who is expendable. She could control him.
Yeah,
she could
easily
ensure,
manipulated.
she could ensure that she can protect her emotions and
Wasn't
her
he gonna
feelings.
go to prison for them or something?
Yeah. Well, Tom was also somewhat a bit of a yes man, but now we've
flipped.
seen exactly. And so I know a lot of people are going to say, why would Shiv do that? It doesn't make any sense for Shiv to do that. No, it actually makes perfect sense for Shiv to betray her brothers. One, her name is Shiv. Like, let's let the literacy kick in. Her name is Shiv. You can't trust anyone whose name is Shiv, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, one, she found a way to at least have one hand on the steering wheel of the company while removing all of her rivals, which would be her two brothers, specifically with Kendall, because they're all gone now. But it looks like she's definitely going to stay married to Tom so that there can be some way for her to still be present and for the company to stay within their family because it's revealed that she's pregnant. The third is she's willing to let the relationship of someone who could betray her, she's willing to give that a chance. So there's that. I think Roman was he was done. Most of the show, Roman just wanted the approval of his dad and to have a family. And I think he doesn't say it in the most eloquent way, but Roman keeps saying, we're all bullshit. You're bullshit. I'm bullshit. She's bullshit. Our news, it's all bullshit. Like he's finally admitting the destructive nature of what the company did to not just the country, but to their family as well. And I think he was just done. He was just done. Kendall, I am nervous for his well-being because he essentially alludes to, this is my entire identity. And if I'm not this, then I don't know what or who I am. The parallels between Kendall and Logan, obviously we just saw so much of that throughout this entire season. The biggest one that I thought that was pretty glaring at the beginning of this season, Logan tells his bodyguard that like he's his closest friend because he's just here to do his job. There's no motives. He's just there and he can trust this guy, not just to protect him physically, but like mentally and emotionally, you can kind of confide in him. Kendall actually ends up hiring him, that same bodyguard. And so you can sort of see the parallels between Kendall doesn't have anyone now either, except for this bodyguard. The parallels between this season and the first season for Kendall were extremely well done. Specifically when it comes to getting a number of votes. In the first season, Kendall wanted a vote of no confidence for Logan. There is some slight justification for it, but like his motives were clearly self-interest.
Yeah, because he had like some weird stuff going on.
Yeah.
Like, wasn't there like a dementia or type
Yeah,
thing?
like health-wise, he wasn't there. Kendall doesn't get the votes in season 1, and he's distraught, right? Because he thought that he had it, and just through weird circumstance, he wasn't able to fully get the nail in the coffin, right? Now we jump over to season 4, and it's the same thing. He gets so close every time, and he just can't quite get it. And that is his character is such a tragic one because he almost gets close to getting everything that he wants in his mind, and something always gets in the way, and it just sort of falls apart. So there's that. The fact that Tom got the company is hilarious because I would not have expected that. I probably would have maybe picked Greg or Jerry, but they went with Tom. I was like, damn, you're right. all of these actors, when they were being interviewed on the red carpet, they're like, you're not going to expect, you wouldn't guess. And I was like, no, they're right. I wouldn't be able to guess that. And a lot of people are going to be like, why did Shiv do that? Dude, those children do not like each other. And knowing Shiv's character, there's no way she would have been okay with Kendall getting the job over her. Because those two were the most qualified out of the 4 children to actually run the company. She wouldn't do it. She would not do it. No. Now that it was like, it became more real, because earlier on it seemed like she was okay with it, but then now it's just kind of like, no, she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. And I mean, I'm sure more thoughts will come to me later on, but it's a bit of a hot take. And I know that it is universally sort of accepted that Game of Thrones is like the best thing that HBO has put out, right? And then you've got some other ones like True Detective, you've got The Wire, you've got The Sopranos.
This is up there with those.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I can tell from the way people talk about it.
100%, it is up there, specifically because the quality is well done, like all of the other ones, like all of their predecessors, and they stuck the landing. That, I think, is probably why it's like, you got to put it up there, man. You got to put it up there. I'm on a high right now, and I am curious to see how people react, because Shiv is not well liked. Some of it is some misogyny because she's a woman, right? But also people really do like Kendall. He has like a slight kind of an underdog story to him because his father sort of always doubted him. As the show went on, you do sort of see that like Kendall is also not a great person, but he is the first character you are introduced to. And so you sort of naturally see certain things from his perspective. I did sympathize with him the most, or I did find myself in specific moments, I would empathize with him more often than with the other characters, just through the way that things would go down. But
because that was my biggest thing when I first tried to watch it. I was like, I don't like none of these people. I was like, I don't care who gets this company.
Yeah, no. I appreciate that the show knew when it was time to end. They didn't drag it out. They didn't go
4 seasons is like pretty short.
Yeah, they had the showrunners, the writers, they had a specific story to tell, and they were like, we're not going to drag this out for 2 or 3 or 4 more seasons now that it's hot, right? And we're getting like tens of millions of viewers, and we could make a whole bunch of money off of this. They're like, that's not what we're doing this for. We're here to tell a story, and then we're going to dip out once it's done. And I appreciate people who do that. Like
best shows do. Breaking Bad.
Yeah. I remember Warner Brothers tried to bring Christopher Nolan back to do more Batman movies. They wanted him to do more Dark Knight movies, and he was like, nah, I had a story to tell with a trilogy, and then that's it. They wanted him to direct The Man of Steel, and he was like, I'm not a money grabber. I just came to tell a story, and then that's it. So that's all the rant that I have, at least for now. I'm going to be thinking about this for a long time. So we also wanted to review Love and Death.
I did have thoughts. I was just, it's not going to take that long.
No, that's fine.
But I was just thinking about how every once in a while, some of these like white actresses, I feel like maybe they do it intentionally. I don't know. But kind of sometimes it feels like they like accidentally stumble into these roles that end up being like a very interesting exploration of white womanhood. Like I feel like Big Little Lies was like that. Like, I don't know if they were all like, maybe they were like, I want to do this because it is an exploration of white womanhood. But my hunch is that sometimes they just think it's about women in general, but it's actually like very specific. Like this is like, this is very much racist at play here, even if there's no non-white people in the show. And I was thinking about Love and Death, and I feel like Love and Death is like that too. Okay, so the first thing that got me thinking was before everything happens, when she's talking to her friend at the park about maybe having an affair with Alan. And she says something, she's like, men get to go off and have their careers. And she's like, and like for us, like this is it. like, and she's like at the park watching her kids, right? And she's basically saying, like, you know, like they get to have this thing to embark on to fulfill them, and from us, like this is the extent of it, right? Like we don't get to explore these other parts of ourselves and our ambition and excitement and that kind of thing. Like we don't get that. And it just got me thinking about how this whole story, at least the way they presented it in the show, is very much a story of white women who have been placed in a position where being a homemaker is their entire identity. And everything that happens is a fallout of like the tension and anxiety that comes out of that reality. And the reason why that is also so racialized too is like I saw a TikTok this week that was talking about this, and I wish I could remember the creator, but people have talked about it before. But this idea of like being a homemaker or the caretaker of your home is a very racialized idea, because up until like the 1970s, it was black women that did all of that. Like black women were the caretakers of everybody's home, especially in the South, right?
Yeah.
And this was in Texas. And so this idea that now white women are placed in this position and she's like, man, this is all we get now. The reason why we think about those roles of like taking care of the children, taking care of the house, cooking, cleaning, etc. Part of the reason why we think about those as you are being like, I don't know, like relegated to this like lower status is because black women were the people that filled that role for so long, and now it's white women being put in that position. And so when you have, you know, the movement of white women trying to work and all this kind of stuff, a lot of it is coming from a place of like, this is not what we should be doing because black women were supposed to do this.
Yeah.
And so then when you have the situation where like she is feeling not content, and then Betty Gore discovers that her husband stepped out on her. You can already see with Betty Gore there was a lot going on, but I do think what happened, that break, was like, this is like the one thing that I have, right? Like my identity as a wife and a mother, and you're stepping in and you're destroying that. And from that point on, that whole scene in the bathroom, or not the bathroom, the washroom, whatever that was, it's like it's an outflow of rage from this perspective of two women that just like are just, I feel like, unhappy with the hand that they have been given and don't have a lot of other options or ways to explore their identity. Like even her, like you were feeling unhappy and you were feeling unsatisfied. I'm talking about what's the main, Candy Montgomery. You're feeling unsatisfied with your life, and so what do you choose to do? You choose to complicate your marriage. Yeah. Because like that's like why being a wife and being a mother are like those are your domains. I don't know. I just thought that it was very interesting. And there was something else I wanted to say too. Oh, the way that she acted after she confessed to everything and how the court case was going on and all of that stuff.
Yo, that was so triggering for me. It was driving me insane.
Very irksome. But also it is another commentary on whiteness and white culture, because when that's it, like you are like, I take care of the home, I'm a good wife, I'm a good mother, that's like your status symbol. And the way that they portrayed Candy in the show was like she prided herself on being that wife, that mother that had it all together, right? She was very involved in church. She would, she had her life together. And so her inability to allow people to see her fall apart, even when it's like, girl, you murdered somebody, like you're like, it's fucked up, everybody knows, like you murdered somebody and the whole world knows that you had an affair. Yeah. But like your entire identity is based on being a perfect wife and mother, and so she could not allow herself to show that things were falling apart. And that idea of like putting up a facade of perfection even when everything is a mess or there's very ugly things going on behind the background, that is a big part of white culture. Because I mean, for so long, a huge part of white households and white homes was like you are doing horrible things in order to maintain what you have here, right? Like everybody knows that you guys are enslaving people or that you are hiring help and, not paying them well, but you have to put up this facade no matter what. And I feel like you still see that in whiteness today of like putting up this, how you are perceived is like more important than the reality sometimes. And like even in the workplace, because it's white dominant culture, that like spills over into the workplace of like a lot of professional culture is just about perception. Like things could be a mess underneath, right? But a lot of it is just about how you are perceived. That is like the most important thing.
Yeah. And
so you can really just see that coming through in the way that she responded during the court case.
Yeah. It's like that idea of letting yourself being vulnerable, even if it would benefit you in the end, was something that she couldn't even fathom. It's like she couldn't even consider this idea of like, Candy, this could save or ruin your life depending on, are you willing to just for a couple of hours in a courtroom put down this facade? And she was so unwilling. She was relentless with it to the point where she would consistently ignore the instructions of her lawyer. And what was that she said? Like Adderall she kept taking?
It wasn't Adderall, some other thing.
I can't remember, but something that would calm her nerves. Yeah. Holy smokes, dude. That's such a perfect point. That's such a perfect point.
Also, the fact that they found her not guilty, I mean, I don't think I necessarily disagree. At least the way that they portrayed it. I mean, we don't know. We will never actually really know what happened. We only have her side of the story to go off of, obviously. But, like, if those are the facts, then, like, I think that they made a strong argument.
Man, not even manslaughter, though.
But any other person would not be getting away with that.
No.
In an identical situation, no other demographic of people would get away with that. Nobody. So
they brought in that psychiatrist, and all of that he said, it all makes sense. She is completely innocent until I heard over 40 times? Over 40 times? At that point, I'm like, dude, you still broke the law, though, in my mind. You snapping and understanding why you as a woman snapped in that particular moment does not absolve you of guilt, in my opinion.
Well, I think the thing that sort of changed my mind about that is that she did attempt to flee.
But there was a point where was it Betty Gore? Mm-hmm. She was defenseless at a certain point. I think that part is where I was, because initially I was like, yeah, I want her to get off, because like Betty Gore did sort of start the whole violent encounter off. But when they watched it through, if there was a moment where she was able to snap out of her rage just sort of temporarily, there were multiple opportunities for her to walk away, because once Betty Gore's lying on her stomach and her face is down on the floor, she's very defenseless because she's already sort of been like struck in the head and on multiple parts. You're not in real danger anymore.
I agree. I think I have two thoughts. One, I don't think it would have made a difference. I think she would have died regardless if she stopped after like one or two hits or the 40.
Yes, but I think her I mean, it doesn't really matter because she got off scotch-free, but I think morally I would feel more comfortable in holistically agreeing in her innocence. If it was less than 40, because 40, I can't think of that number. I'm trying to think of like,
I feel like if it's true that she had absolutely no control, I mean, like,
no, I get it. I just, the idea of, I think what's bugging me is very much what you sort of tapped on. There is a racial component there of like, we are willing to let this white woman, or let me rephrase that. We are willing to empathize with this white woman's rage of her hitting another individual with an axe 40 times and understand her holistically as a human being. That is never given to women of color.
I agree.
I think that's what's triggering me.
To me, it's like, that doesn't mean that Candy shouldn't have been extended that. It means that women of color should be.
Yes. No, you're right. I'm not disagreeing with that. But I don't know, man. There's just time. It's just kind of like, even when they portrayed it, when they revisited the scene in the final episode and we sort of lived through it, the show writers didn't even give us 41 whacks because they were like, that'd be too excessive. I started to count it. We ended at like before we got to 20. We didn't get to 40. So my mind trying to comprehend, wait, that was gruesome to watch. And that was only half? You're saying you went 20 more?
Even that, what causes her to snap, it goes back to that same problem with white womanhood and perception.
Yes.
Because that whole thing with her mom shushing her on the way in the hospital was because her mom was like, what will people think of you in the waiting room? Mm-hmm. The girl's bleeding. Everybody in the waiting room knows something has happened.
Right.
But still, that idea of perception, how people think about you. I mean, I'm sure I would love to hear from some white women. Like, that pressure to suppress yourself for the comfort of other people, like that obviously that is a gendered experience across the board.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
But I do think that there is something very specific about white womanhood sometimes and the ways that it shows up for them. And you know, the way that it's probably handed down from generation to generation, that I'd be very interested to just hear about, because that, you know, I don't know.
What did you make of the husband?
So I'm curious to know like what he was like in real life.
Yeah.
But it seems like the way that they chose to portray him in the show was, he's like, to me, I thought that he's one of those people that is like very like both sides. Like he can see both sides of a situation. Mm-hmm. Even in a scenario where you would think that your ability to empathize and understand would be greatly hindered, right? Because your wife was just murdered. But I think that the reason why, I think one, he probably just wasn't like a very outwardly emotional person. But I do think part of it was, I don't think, at least the show never showed that he felt rage and anger at Candy. And I think he believed her, because I think based on how they presented Betty Gore, her story was consistent, right, with like what we had seen about Betty Gore and like her emotional state, I guess.
Right.
So to me, I read it as like, he's very saddened and it's obviously tragic, but he believes Candy. Yeah,
and I think I did have a lot of sympathy for him, because it felt like people wanted him to have an expectation of a certain kind of outward emotion, and it's like they wouldn't accept that people might grieve this process differently.
Yeah, that's just not who he is.
Yeah, they wouldn't. And so then you started to have some questions come up of, because he isn't grieving in the way that we think is the appropriate version of grief, that must mean he's complicit. Like, you started to hear people have those rumors. Even Betty Gore's family started to, they never outright said it, but they were kind of, they were winking at it very heavily, of like, you know, not even a cry, right? They're sort of digging that hole a bit of the conspiracy of like, maybe he was involved. And even in that scene of like when the other woman comes in later on, and then they have like an intimate moment where she kisses him. I saw that as this is an example of what men go through on a number of instances emotionally. One, you break up, and for a lot of guys, the initial reaction is to fill that void, or not even fill it, cover that void with something new, some new form of sexual intimacy, because you just want to quick fix it, right? Just as a guy, you just want to fix it. That's the first thing that I read that as. The second thing is, I think for a lot of men, there is an inability for us to process our emotions in healthy ways. And so oftentimes the way we are able to put our guard down on an emotional level is through physical and sexual intimacy. Right. And I did see some things of like, oh, this dude, like, he ain't shit. Like, he didn't feel bad about his wife. And I'm like, well, I read that completely different, because I'm like, I've seen a lot of guys, even like, I remember a lot of times in like high school and part of like the earlier years of college, where like, I kind of did the same thing of like, you know what? I need to feel this uncomfortable feeling. I don't want to have to actually wrestle with the emotions that I'm experiencing. Let me go find a partner that I can just be somewhat romantically involved with. And once I feel like I have buried the emotions enough, I'm just going to like jump to the next one. Like it's, you know, and that I thought that I know the story isn't about him, but I thought it could have been interesting to explore that maybe if we got a couple of more episodes, because there's a lot you could say there about men and their inability to process emotions in a healthy way. I mean, like we've seen more and more studies come out about like, you know, suicide rates for men is at like a really high level right now. And men feel like they don't have friends. They feel like it's hard for them to get partners. They're a lot lonelier. And yeah, I really felt for him. I also really like that actor, you know? So he was just
got
doing a
something
great
else
job.
coming out pretty soon.
It's a good show.
It was quite good. A good
That was a good
miniseries.
show. Good show.
I love a little true crime. Okay.
Yeah, man, I love Elizabeth Olsen, but she's kind of on that wave where like she's starting to like slam on Marvel also.
Oh, I saw she was saying just sign up for one project.
Yeah, I mean, there's some other things that I saw, like some other interviews. I think she did like a lie detector test, and it definitely was like, it could be her personality, but it felt like, damn girl, like, is it like just a trend in Hollywood right now? I guess maybe that's what it is. But I just kind of rolled my eyes at it.
Maybe it's just not her cup of tea. Maybe she just didn't really realize until she was like, dang, I got this contract.
It sounds like she loved it, but I think she was sad that she had to turn down things.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of your time. It's like a really big...
It's that, and I also don't know if you're allowed to do certain things. Like their schedule comes before anything else. And
yeah. Like there definitely have been actors that did do other projects.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you probably
Florence
would be
Pugh
difficult.
does a number of things.
She's not nearly as central though.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I think she'll. But she's also involved with like Dune. Like that's got to take up a lot of her time, or at least it could have.
Probably.
I don't know. We'll see.
Not quite. I don't know if it would be as much as Marvel because they're just so constantly coming out with things.
I thought that, but they're not constantly coming out with the same people. You know, you've got.
True.
You know what I mean?
It's true, but it's also not true. Like,
because we haven't seen Sam since 2020.
Yeah, now that you can say that about the people now,
right?
But like
that's what I mean.
For the first three phases, I feel like towards the end, it would have been a lot because there was a lot of overlap.
Like every other movie,
or like
Robert
Scarlett
Downey's
Johansson was in like almost all of them. Like she's always, so like.
Speaking of it, man, there's a lot of stuff coming up with Marvel. Because Secret Invasion's coming up. So I think Rhodey's going to be in Secret Invasion. I think I saw him in the trailer. I'm very intrigued to see how they portray Rhodey, because he's been on the wrong side of history a number of times.
I mean, he's a military.
Yeah, I started thinking about, like, damn, Rhodey, you've been wrong a lot, right? Because you jump back to like Iron Man 2, way back. Iron Man 2, yeah, Tony was definitely wilding, but he's trying to take Tony's suit and essentially hand it over to the military. In what world? I understand Tony was a drunk billionaire who was being irresponsible, but how is giving it to the government the better alternative? Especially you, as a black man, knowing the history of what the government
He's a black Republican.
I'm not going to say that, but then also, you think about the fact that Hydra was infiltrating American governments all throughout that time.
Yeah, it would have been a terrible decision, but he is a black Republican. He trusts the government.
And then in Civil War, right? There's that, because he sided with the Accords. And having rewatched Winter Soldier, I'm sorry, Captain America was right when it came to the Accords. I'm going to stand 10 toes down on that.
Yes.
Right? There's the other thing. Then, Falcon Winter Soldier, he is questioning Sam. He's like, why'd you give up the shield? And I'm like, my black brother, my black king in Christ. How can you not understand why a black man might be a little hesitant in picking up a shield and being called Captain America? Think Rhodey. I need you to put on your thinking caps.
They are painting a very clear picture of the type of black person that Rhodey is. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose.
I'm not going to call him that, I'm not going to call him the, but I'm just saying, like, you know what I mean?
I think he's one of those, like, racism exists, but like, we're individuals. Like, you can rise above. It doesn't have to stop you. It doesn't have to hinder you.
And I want to root for him. I do want to root for him. He's getting his movie.
They're doing that? I thought that was like maybe not happening.
No, they're doing it. And so I am intrigued. I hope we'll get more. And I know some people are like, would Anthony Mackie, like, can he carry it? Just his charisma or his acting range. But we know Don Cheadle, he's got it. Like, that's an Oscar winning kind of dude. You know what I mean? So I'm excited to see what he can do with this. The same way I'm excited to see what Samuel Jackson's going to do.
Oh yeah, I saw that Blackberry movie today.
Oh,
that movie is very good. It's much better than you think. It's like extremely good. It's just like a very phenomenal film.
What's the premise?
It's about the rise and fall of Blackberry.
Oh.
Because I don't think I realized this, but like they were the first smartphone.
Yes.
Like they started all of that. And then like they now they don't even like exist.
Yeah. And
so it just sort of paints the pic. It's kind of like, The Social Network or that movie Air, but about Blackberry. It's like one of those.
Okay. Air, was that the one with we just watched?
Yeah.
That was actually really good.
No, that was phenomenal. Those movies, I really like those. They just need to come out with a good one about Apple and Steve Jobs. I don't know why, but they always try and it always sucks.
There was one with Michael Fassbender and there was one with
Ashton Kutcher.
Neither one of them really hit for me.
No. So they just, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's not as interesting a story, but this was good. It was like actually extremely funny. Like we were laughing out loud in the movie theater.
Oh, you went with Lacey?
No, but like the strangers.
Oh, right.
The strangers in the movie theater. No, I went to East Street Cinema. It's like it's not in big theaters.
Oh, it's one of those.
Yeah. But yeah, there was lots of laugh out loud moments, and then as it goes on, you just realize like, I don't know, people just became kind of unhinged, and it just kind of fell apart. It was like it started. How the story is always like this. Yeah, it's like it starts out very like wholesome and like just two buddies or like a group of buddies that are just extremely intelligent and they have a really inspiring idea and they happen to get it into the hands of the the right people at the time who can make things happen for them and make it explode and go big. There was also a lot of funny things that they were talking about. There's just like a lot of hints about like coming changes in technology because like they talked about minutes a lot, and then one of the big things
like phone minutes,
because that was like at the time that's what like AT&T, Verizon, like they sold minutes. That's how they made their money.
Yeah.
When they, obviously a big part of their downfall was the iPhone, right? So they like show the moment when they're at the warehouse. Like they were at the top of the smartphone game, Blackberry, right? Like I think they said that at their height, they owned like 45% of that market. Like they were that phone, which I remember because remember like Obama had a Blackberry. It was like a big deal. I remember my grandpa wanted one, and we were like, "You're not gonna be able to work that phone." They were that guy.
So what happened with the Apple reveal?
So they show in the movie when Steve Jobs did his reveal and his talk about the iPhone, and he like goes to the talk, and you know he's like it plays music. He's basically, you know, because they were going from iPod to iPhone for the first time ever. So he's like, it plays music, it sends emails, it does all of that. And then he was like, he showed all of these smartphones that exist, BlackBerry, Motorola, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he was like, all of these phones, you know, they have the keyboard and then they have the screen. He's like, what we're going to do, we're going to make it all screen. Your keyboard is in the screen. And and the founder of BlackBerry, who by that point has sort of become unhinged. He was like nice and wholesome at the beginning, and then over time he just becomes a little unhinged.
Who portrays him?
He's an actor that you will know him,
yeah.
But I don't know his name.
But go ahead.
He's like, that's stupid, like that's not gonna work. But also you can see that he is worried about
He's in denial.
Then they find Apple's like internal projected numbers for their iPhone sales, and it's like skyrocketed. It's like extreme numbers, which at the time they were like, how is that physically possible? Because I didn't realize this, but at the beginning when they first started making iPhones, there was like, not iPhones, but smartphones, there was like a limit to the number of like essentially phones that you could have, that you could sell, because I guess like they just didn't have like the infrastructure to have all those phones, right? They talked a little bit about like the technology of it, but I can't explain it. Like when they said it, I understood it, but like I can't.
It's like in Chernobyl when they would break the stuff down.
Yeah,
did you watch them? Yeah. If I were to try to explain it to people, bro, I couldn't do it. No.
But iPhone's numbers were like off the chain, and he was like, "There's just no way that's gonna work." He was like, "They're gonna crash AT&T's networks," because iPhone went with AT&T, BlackBerry went with Verizon. That's who they were partnered with, right? He was like, "They're gonna crash AT&T. It's not gonna work." He calls up one of the CEOs of BlackBerry, calls up the guy at AT&T trying to make a deal, and he's like, "Listen, we'll give you a bunch of iPhones right now at a discount. Blah 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 blah. Like you'll get a bunch of minutes." And the guy on the phone is like, "Well, that's the problem, is that in every minute there's just a minute." Hangs up, and the CEO has like a realization. He's like, "They're moving to data. They're not gonna sell minutes anymore. They're moving to data." And it's like, yeah, that's like, yep, that is what happened. It was just very, very good, and like kind of tragic too, because like, yeah, in the end, like they lose everything. There's also some legal stuff that when they were trying to expand BlackBerry and sell more phones than like I guess networks could handle, they had to purge some engineers from some other businesses because their engineers were good, but they were like, we need some better. So they had to get some people from Google, some people from whatever. They're a Canadian company also. BlackBerry is Canadian. So to get some of these other engineers, they did like, I think it's called insider trading or something. They did some illegal shit where they like gave them stock and they backdated it, and it was like it didn't exist or something. Like they made up some money that didn't yet exist, right? To give them like huge deals, like $10 million because they had to get these engineers to break their contracts with these major tech companies that cost a lot. So it was $10 million, and then the SEC comes after them, like over a decade later. So yeah, like the SEC comes after them, the iPhone comes out, and yeah, in a couple of years they go from 45% to literally zero.
This is what happened with Kodak. My dad tells me that story all the time. People, they were trying to tell some of the higher ups, like, yo, this digital camera, whatever that ever means, is coming out, and I think we need to be worried. And it's like they wouldn't believe that their time might be coming to an end because you were at the top for so long.
Yep.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with a movie for that.
I want all. I like those. I'm realizing how I'm really into those. I want all of them. It's like I kind of know how this is going to end, but watching how you get there is fascinating.
The rise up and then the fall. We didn't get the fall in air, but it was cool to see because it looked like
they started at the fall.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
were not doing well.
That's true. That is quite true.
But all of the little hints that they give, that it's kind of like a little inside joke between like the viewer, that they're when they say stuff like, "Oh, this will never work," and as a viewer, you're like, "Yes, it will." Like it will, in fact, work.
That's good. I'm gonna have to watch that. Put that on my
very,
list.
very, very good.
Put that on my list.
Laughed a lot. There was a lot of really good humor in there.
Thank you all so much. We'll see you all next time.